LaRue, page 128. By day, politicians and other important people made speeches in front of television cameras about how they were going to rehabilitate the Frederick Douglass's project. But as soon as the sun went down and the reporters went home for dinner, it was the same old thing: gunfire, fear, isolation. You believe that crap? Terrell said on yet another night while we watched some white windbag in a suit talk about what he was going to do for our underprivileged, uneducated, uncivilized neighbors and friends. They ain't gonna do nothin'. Nia came into the room with Xavier on her hip, her cell phone against her ear and a frown on her face. I've been waiting all day for him to call back. If I leave a message, he always calls back. Always. Maybe his phone's broke, said Grandma, bouncing Jada on her knee. Nia gave me and Terrell a worried look. Any idea where he could be? She asked. I could check a few spots, Terrell said. Why don't you do that? Nia said, and if you find him, tell him to call home right away. Terrell had to go upstairs first. In the stairwell on the 14th floor, a disciple sat with a sawed-off rifle across his knee. His chin was propped in his hand, and he was writing in a battered spiral notebook. It was Darius from Terrell's baby gang, soon to shoot. Now he, too, was a disciple. When he saw me, he straightened up and gripped the rifle. No one but disciples passed this point. Marcus knows him, Terrell said. Darius shook his head. No exceptions. Orders is orders. It's okay, I said, Terrell. You go. Terrell continued up the stairs. Darius relaxed and laid the rifle across his knees again. How long you been a disciple? I asked. A few weeks. Didn't used to have guards up here, I said. Darius raised and dropped his shoulder and went back to scratching words into his notebook. Another wannabe rapper. Terrell came back. Marcus says it's okay. Darius frowned uncertainly. You sure? Do I have to go back and get him? Terrell asked. It was a subtle threat. Marcus would be none too pleased to be bothered about something so trivial. Darius waved me past. There must have been a half a dozen disciples milling around on the 15th floor, including Bubbles and Jules, who'd been jumped in the year before. Tension was thick, and gang members were speaking in hushed, hurried voices. More than one narrowed his eyes suspiciously when I passed with Terrell. We went into Marcus's apartment and followed voices into the kitchen. Marcus, Jamar, and Tyrone were standing around the kitchen table, which was covered with guns and boxes of ammunition. When'd you last see LaRue? Marcus asked me. This morning, I said. Was he strapped? Didn't notice, I said. He usually is. We gotta squat up and spill some blood, Jamar said to Marcus. They want a war, they'll get a war. We need to know for certain first, Marcus said grimly. He ain't even late yet. Come on, man, Jamar said. LaRue ain't here. He ain't answered his phone all day. Where do you think he's at? Somewhere else, Marcus barked, clearly displeased that Jamar was doubting him. Maybe he stopped to see a girlfriend. Maybe he got pinched. Maybe he got ambushed by a crew that ain't Gentry. You want to start a war with the wrong enemy? Gentry's the enemy no matter what, Jamar grumbled. Marcus opened a flip phone and dialed. The room grew quiet. He let the phone ring 5 times, then snapped it shut. You each take a man and go look for him, he said. He told Jamar and Tyrone, soon as you know anything, call me. Jamar and Tyrone headed out. You want me to look too? Terrell asked eagerly. I want you to sit on that bench like you're supposed to, Marcus snapped, annoyed. But Marcus glared at him, and Terrell didn't finish the sentence. We headed back downstairs. At the 3rd floor, I turned toward Grandma's, but Terrell grabbed my arm. Come on, we're going to find LaRue. But Marcus said, Marcus wants me to grow old and die on that bench, Terrell hissed. I'm going to show him I'm better than that. He patted me on the shoulder. We got each other's backs, Deshawn. Long as we stick together, we'll be okay. I knew disobeying Marcus was a mistake, but Terrell was right about one thing. For Nia and Xavier and Jada's sake, I wanted to find LaRue, and I wanted to find him alive. Outside, the night air was chilly. Winter wasn't quite ready to give up and let spring in. Terrell started walking west toward the flats. Why this way? I asked. The hobby center, Terrell said. Sometimes he plays that Warhammer game and don't want anyone to know, so he turns his phone off. Suddenly, I remembered that when LaRue left the apartment that morning, he had that black plastic case with him. Relief filtered through me. I'd been scared that my sister had lost her man, and like so many of us, those babies would never know their father. We got to the hobby center. Inside, racks of comic books and shelves of action figures lined the walls. Terrell led me to the back where groups of teenagers were huddled over tables covered with Warhammer armies. Everything stopped when Terrell entered. They recognized his colors. Anyone seen LaRue? Terrell asked. Who? Someone said. Medium-sized, long braids, diamond stud in his right ear. I said. He was here. Probably left 10 minutes ago. Terrell and I shared a puzzled look. If LaRue left, why hadn't we run into him on the streets? Was he with anyone? I asked. The guys exchanged glances and shook their heads. Terrell jerked his thumb toward the door and we left. Pop! At the sound of the gunshot, we both ducked. Car door slammed and a low gray sedan shot out of an alley next to the hobby center and sped away. Terrell and I ran into the alley. In the shadows, a body lay on the ground. My heart started racing and I slowed down as if part of me didn't want to know, but I knew. LaRue's hands were tied behind him and he lay curled up as if he'd been kneeling when they shot him. A single bullet through the back of his head. I felt something under my foot. Black and white beads were scattered on the ground. They'd broken the string on purpose. It was the Gentry gangster's way of letting us know who had pulled the trigger. Terrell cursed, and I heard beeps as he dialed a number. Part of LaRue's forehead was gone. Even in death, his eyes were squeezed shut. My head started throbbing. He knew what was coming, I muttered. Huh? Terrell didn't understand. Look at his eyes. He knew they were going to kill him. They made him kneel. In the dim light, something glistened on LaRue's cheek. I reached down and touched the moisture. Tears. He'd been crying when they shot him. The throbbing in my head grew into pounding. I saw Xavier's and Jada's expectant eyes and Nia's fretful eyes. A car pulled into the alley. Crap! Terrell grunted. Thinking it might be Gentry, he pulled his gun and shielded his eyes. Car doors opened. The headlights stayed on. I couldn't see anything except the glare. There were footsteps. Terrell backed away, and I felt a shadow as Marcus stood over me and LaRue. The pain made my head feel like it was going to explode. I felt my hands clench and everything went black. You killed him! I launched myself at Marcus. The scuffle was short. In no time, Marcus had me tied up in his strong arms and hands, but I was still fighting, squirming and cursing. You made him a runner. You got him killed. Marcus increased his grip, pinning my arms to my sides. I heard him say, "Put those guns away." I opened my eyes. Jules and 2 other gangbangers had their guns out, ready to kill me if I did anything to Marcus. They hesitated, then did as they were told. I tried to twist out of Marcus's grip, but his hands were like steel clamps. What do you want us to do? Jules asked. Marcus nodded at LaRue's body. Search his pockets. Don't touch him! I started to struggle anew. Leave him alone! Marcus clamped a hand over my mouth. I twisted and tried to get free, but he put an arm around my chest and squeezed until it was hard to breathe, forcing me to stop fighting. Jules went through LaRue's pockets and came up with a couple of crumpled dollar bills and a cell phone. Give it here. Still holding me with one arm, Marcus took the phone. For a split second his gaze settled on Terrell and a frown formed on his face. All of you, bounce, now. Jules nodded at me. What about him? He going with me, Marcus said. The hell I am! Once again I tried to fight, but Marcus pushed me down face first on the cold, wet pavement and twisted my arm behind my back. That's enough, he grunted, and held me until the others had gone. I felt his warm breath close to my ear. I'm going to let you go, and you ain't going to do nothing stupid, understand? When I didn't answer, he twisted my arm harder, and I felt the pain shoot up through my shoulder like it was going to pop out of its joint. You feel me? He growled. Only this time it sounded more like a threat. Trembling and seized with pain, I nodded yes. Marcus, let go. Get in the car. I pushed myself up from the ground and looked at LaRue's body. You just gonna leave him there like that? Marcus gritted his teeth. I said, get in the car. I did as I was told. Marcus looked over the back seat as he backed the Mercedes out of the alley. He drove about half a block and pulled over. I watched silently as he dialed 911 on LaRue's phone. There's a body in the alley of 900 block of Whitmore, he told the operator, and gave her LaRue's name and address. Then he hung up, got out of the car, and dropped LaRue's phone to the ground. He crushed it with his foot and kicked the pieces into a storm drain. Back in the car, he said, get this straight. LaRue was a runner because he wanted to be a runner. There's only 3 ways up: treasurer, enforcer, or runner. We're okay in the treasurer department, and LaRue didn't want to be no enforcer, and that's that. I sat on the front seat, silent, arms crossed. People in this country were supposed to have choices. Wasn't that what America was about? Freedom to choose? But when you grew up in the projects, there was no choices, no good ones at least. I thought Marcus would start the car, but he didn't. You think LaRue liked living in that apartment with you and your grandma? A man wants a crib of his own. He wants a ride and enough bank to keep his babies in Pampers and go out at night if he chooses. What happens to my sister and her babies now? I asked. Marcus drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. He thumbed off a bunch of bills and handed them to me. The distant wail of a siren broke the silence. A cop car with flashing lights came up the block and turned down the alley. Marcus started the car and we drove away. How come you waited? I asked. To make sure the right people found the body.